Hello.
Hello, please.
Yeah, what's the problem, sir?
We just drove down our farm track.
Yeah.
Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it.
Yeah.
It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
The next newspaper article comes from the 9th of September 1997 with the headline, Forensic Scientist Describes How Trio Were Killed. 3 men killed in the Range Rover murders were each shot once from point-blank range before 5 other wounds were inflicted, probably with a pump-action shotgun the Old Bailey heard yesterday. Forensic scientist John Burns concluded this occurred to prevent any escapes or attempts to hinder the shooting. Quote, it appeared the incident happened extremely quickly. 1 shot was fired at each victim before further shots were fired. Most of the shots appeared to have been fired at close range through the open rear offside door of the vehicle. Each of the men had received shotgun wounds to the head. There was much blood in the vehicle with splattering of blood and tissue on many of the surfaces, he added. Mr. Burns' estimate of the range was within 2 feet or so of a damaged headrest and added it was consistent with the same shot having caused injury to the neck or head. Tate, slumped in the back seat, had a superficial wound caused to the back of the head, resulting in damage to the scalp, and there was a large shotgun entry wound just behind the left ear. He also had an entry wound to the left side of the chest. Front seat passenger Tucker had an entry wound to the back of the head, about the level of the ears, and 2 wounds to the side of the face. The driver Rolfe had an entry wound behind the top of the right ear and an entry wound at the side of the right neck. The next newspaper article comes from the 10th of September 1997 with the headline, Jail Meeting Led to Drug Gang Shooting. A chance meeting in a Suffolk jail was to lead to the deaths of 3 drug barons who were found shot dead inside a Range Rover, a court heard yesterday. An Old Bailey jury was told that Michael Steele, 54, one of the men accused of the killings, was serving time inside Hollesley Bay Prison back in 1993. It was there he bumped into his old friend Pat Tate, who was found dead on December the 7th, 1995, along with Tony Tucker, 38, of High Road Fobbing, and Craig Rolfe, 26, of Calshot Avenue, Chafford 100. Darren Nichols, the alleged getaway driver for the killings, also shared a wing with the 2 men and had got to know them both. He told the triple murder trial, Tate and Steele were in each other's company most of the time. When he heard Tate was coming, Steele was definitely pleased. Nichols made the claims during his first day giving evidence. He is expected to be in the dock for nearly 2 weeks. Nichols claims Steele of St Mary's Road, Great Bentley, and Womes 36 of Main Road, Brockford, Suffolk, killed Mr Tate, Mr Tucker and Mr Rolfe after a cannabis deal went wrong. He said they lured the friends to remote Workhouse Lane in Rettendon with the promise of a lucrative cocaine deal, then shot them at point-blank range. The 2 men deny 3 charges of murder. Nichols told the court about 4 trips he made to Amsterdam to buy cannabis, including an occasion when the drugs proved to be dud. He said that this was the deal that Tate and Steele fell out over, as Tate, 37, of Gordon Road, Basildon, had invested £70,000. He said it was also the deal that had led to Tate's death. The case continues. The following newspaper article comes from the 11th of September 1997, with the headline, Grass Tells of Shootings. One of the 2 men accused of the execution of 3 drug dealers laughed as he recounted the shootings that Old Bailey heard yesterday. Supergrass witness Darren Nichols, a self-confessed drugs dealer, told of the chilling moments when he picked up Jack Womes and Michael Steele from the murder scene, a lonely farm track at Rettendon near Chelmsford. Womes allegedly told how his partner's gun had fallen apart. Mr Nichols said, Jack had laughed after he had said it. He said he drove Womes to the scene, believing that a drug deal meeting was to take place. When he returned to the remote lane, Womes got into the back of the car and Steele got into the front passenger seat. Quote, when the front door opened and the light came on, I saw Jack's hands. He was wearing surgical type gloves. They were covered in speckles of something which I could see was red. From the way Steele spoke, he suddenly realised what was going on. Quote, "I took it someone had been killed." Mr. Nichols said, "Mick started to hand guns over to Jack in the back. I could see bits of barrels pass over. They were quite short." Quote, "Mick asked me several times if I was okay. I did not feel okay." He added, "I did say to one of them, I hope I never fall out with you. I just said it as a comment. I think Mick said, you're not like those, it wouldn't happen to you." Steele allegedly told him that Wholmes was a cold-hearted bastard who had pointed his gun into the victim's Range Rover and put shots into all three immediately. Nichols added that Steele said after they were dead, Jack reloaded and one at a time shot them in the back of the head without any emotion. Steele, 54, of Great Bentley, and Wholmes, 35, of Brockford, Suffolk, deny murdering Patrick Tate, Anthony Tucker and Craig Rolfe, all from Essex, in December 1995. The next newspaper article comes from the 12th of September 1997 with the headline, "I did illicit deals with corrupt cop. Supergrass admits to scams as barrister questions his evidence." A Supergrass at the centre of a triple murder trial has sensationally admitted illicit deals with a corrupt Essex police officer. Darren Nichols, who claims he drove the getaway car after the killings, also told the court he would have done anything to see the two men he is accused of the executions arrested. Nichols was clearly uncomfortable and often angry as he was cross-examined in the Old Bailey dock. He admitted being an informer for the corrupt officer who has been referred to as Detective Constable A in court. But Steele's defence, Graham Parkins QC, told him, "You were involved in illegal activities with him and you profited from what that officer did and what he allowed you to do." Nichols got to know the policeman only weeks after the shootings, and Mr. Parkins claimed that both Nichols and the corrupt officer plotted to board a North Sea ferry and steal £150,000 being taken abroad to buy drugs. They then planned to make amphetamine, then use it to set up two men who had displeased Nichols. It was also revealed in court that the officer arranged for Nichols to sell drugs to customers and then pass on their names and details so he could arrest them and win promotion. Nichols told the senior officer about 60 kilos of dud cannabis which he had dumped in a gravel pit and then blamed two innocent men for putting it there. The officer let Nichols receive a £400 reward for his public spiritedness and they bought drinks together to celebrate. Nichols claimed he only became involved with the officer in a bid to get back at the two men he claims killed Tate, Tucker and Rolfe after they had fallen out over a cannabis deal. Quote, "There was no limit to what I would do to try and get him to arrest Wholmes and Steele," he admitted. But Mr. Parkins rejected his claim. "Despite what you and that officer were up to, you never once told him, even when raised the question of Rettendon, that you claimed to know who had committed these murders." Nichols admitted he hadn't. When questioned about Officer A by other police, Nichols claimed he was just an informer. But when those officers told him they had recordings of his telephone conversations with Detective Constable A, he said, quote, "Oh dear," and laughed. Nichols told the court, "I laughed because the tape didn't matter to me. Compared to the trouble I was in, that was nothing." Mr. Parkins, pointing at Steele and Wholmes, said, "Yes, by then you had made allegations in another direction." But Mr. Nichols, how does one know when you are lying and when you are not? The case continues. Okay, so I'll just cut in here briefly and share some of my own thoughts regarding this article, as this is one of the more interesting aspects of this case overall. Just how long was that relationship going on for between this corrupt officer and Darren Nichols? The problem that we have is that we only have Darren Nichols' word for this. He claims that he met this officer sometime around the Christmas period 1995, after these murders were committed. Now, what we can't say with any certainty is that Nichols is either being truthful here or dishonest. We simply don't know. Did this relationship last a matter of months, a matter of years? And most importantly, another thing that we don't know is who was this officer connected with in the criminal world? It's pretty clear when you read this article and also when you take a look at the court transcripts that this officer was buying and selling information to various people in the criminal fraternity. The problem we have is we just don't know how deep those connections go. So it's okay to say that Darren Nichols is telling the truth, he's completely honest about what he's saying, he had nothing to gain by giving evidence against Steele and Wholmes. But we don't know about this connection with this corrupt officer. Who was this corrupt officer dealing with during this time period? And most importantly, how much information, if any, was exchanged between Nichols and this corrupt officer regarding the triple murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe? The next newspaper article comes from the 12th of September 1997 with the headline, "I did illicit deals with corrupt cop. Supergrass admits to scams as barrister questions his evidence." A Supergrass at the centre of a triple murder trial has sensationally admitted illicit deals with a corrupt Essex police officer. Darren Nichols, who claims he drove the getaway car after the killings, also told the court he would have done anything to see the two men he is accused of the executions arrested. Graham Parkins, QC, defending Steele, asked Nichols, "Were you involved in these murders yourself with other men?" An angry Nichols replied, "I've told you I picked them up from the murders they committed. I was badly affected by it." Nichols, a police informer, was arrested by detectives in May 1996 on a cannabis charge. During interviews with officers, he claimed Wombs and Steele had carried out the Rettendon murders and the pair were eventually charged. Mr. Parkins responded, "You told those officers you didn't really want anything to do with Mr. Steele after the killings. You had been duped into ferrying men to and from a triple shooting. If you are telling the truth, an awful and evil thing had been done to you." Nichols said, "That's right." Mr. Parkins continued, "Mr. Steele would hardly be on your Christmas card list." Nichols replied, "No." "Can you explain then why you sent his family a Christmas card in 1995? You also gave this man you claim was a killer a case of canned beer and a bottle of wine." Nichols replied, "Yes, but only because he gave my children a present." Mr. Parkins told the court Nichols had been given a radio-controlled aeroplane for Christmas and 2 days later was at Steele's house flying it in his garden. Nichols admitted it was true. He said he should fly it because he's a pilot, but he's crashed it several times into a tree. Mr. Parkins added, "Isn't it true you then took your little girls to the house of this triple killer so you could watch the rabbits run in the garden?" Steele sat laughing in the dock as Nichols replied quietly, "Yes." Nichols, a trained electrician, also admitted he continued working on the renovation of Steele's new home in St Mary's Road, Great Bentley, Essex, for several months after the murders. And despite telling police he had tried to avoid Steele, telephone records were produced in court to show Nichols had phoned him twice in the week following the killings. The trial continues. The next newspaper article comes from the 16th of September 1997 with the headline, "Star Witness is a Persistent Liar." The alleged getaway driver for the triple gangland murder in Rettendon claimed he took 5 months to spill the beans to detectives because he feared ending his days in jail. Darren Nichols, the prosecution's star witness, has spent 6 grueling days in the witness box and cross-examination is expected to continue well into next week. Graham Parkins, QC, defending Steele, told Nichols, "You are both a blatant and persistent liar. An opportunist, I suggest, grasping at straws to save yourself." He told the jury that Nichols did not name Wombs and Steele as the killers until after police had arrested him for the murders in May 1996. The bodies of Tate, Tucker and Rolfe were found in a Range Rover at Rettendon on December 7, 1995. During interviews in May, Nichols told officers the defendants had gunned down the 3 men to pay back Tate for cheating on a cannabis deal. Nichols has admitted he did want to set up 54-year-old Steele and 36-year-old Wombs, but he claimed his plan was to pass on information about their drug deals to a police officer dubbed Detective Constable A by the court. He denied dreaming up a tale of murder. Mr. Parkins told him, "I suggest by December the 6th, you knew Mr. Steele very well and had the means to make up a plausible story about him and his colleagues." Nichols replied, "Yes, if I wished to do so, but they did do the killings." Steele sat shaking his head in the dock at Nichols' reply, and Mr. Parkins continued, "Are you falsely accusing these men when you know who was really responsible?" Nichols said, "They did it." Mr. Parkins responded, "You want to protect yourself and others who are not before this court." Nichols replied adamantly, "No, they did it." He admitted his main aim in becoming an informer for Detective Constable A was to get Wombs and Steele arrested. Mr. Parkins, clicking his fingers, told him, "You had the means to get them arrested just like that." Nichols said, "Yes, but because I gave them a lift that night, I felt involved and thought I could spend my whole life in prison." Mr. Parkins told the court Detective Constable A, who he described as corrupt, was friends with the boss of a company that electrician Nichols had worked for, and the pair often went clay pigeon shooting together. A forensic scientist who gave evidence at the beginning of the trial revealed the cartridges used to shoot Tate, Tucker and Rolfe were the size 7.5 popular with clay pigeon shooters. Many thanks for joining me for today's video. In front of you shortly you'll be able to see some other videos from the channel concerning this case, and also the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos that I've made regarding this particular case in one convenient folder. I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video. Take care. Cheers.